You are LockedOn Braves POSTCAST, part of LockedOn Sports Atlanta, your team every day.
Hello and welcome into the Braves POSTCAST, part of the LockedOn Podcast Network, your team every day. Grant McAuley, Jake Mastroianni coming your way after an 8-3 Braves win to open up their 9-game road trip. And this is the foot that you want to start out on. If you're the Braves, you know it's going to be a bit of a test, and you want to be able to take advantage of matchups in which perhaps you can start to get your season back on track the way that you wanted to. And this Braves and Red Sox quick 2-game series could go a long way towards setting the tone for this road trip. We're going to talk about the mastery of Max Fried, or as I like to say, Maximum Fried, which was on display tonight at Fenway Park. We'll also take a look, unfortunately, at another injury scare for the Braves, some good things that happened for the offense, and some roster moves that were going on prior to this series getting started as well. We'll cover all of that on this edition of the Postcast. Before we get started, hit that thumbs up button, subscribe to Locked On Sports Atlanta right here on YouTube, subscribe to Locked On Braves wherever you get your podcast. This episode is brought to you by eBay Motors. From brakes to exhaust kits and beyond, eBay Motors has over 122 million parts to keep your ride or die alive. With all the parts you need at the prices you want, it's easy to bring home that big win. Keep your ride or die alive at ebaymotors.com. Eligible items only. Exclusions apply. eBay guaranteed fit only available to U.S. customers. I think that Max Fried was serving all customers a very big helping of strikeouts on this night. A career-high 13 for the Braves left-hander. Jake, I think, I know the kind of performances he's been putting in for what goes on about 6 weeks now. This may have been the best of the bunch.
Yeah, it is. And it's crazy to say that. We've seen him, throw complete game shutouts. We've seen him throw complete games. And, this is the one. He gave up a couple of runs. Some of those not his fault. But he strikes out 13. He has over 20 whiffs. It's a different Max Fried. We talk about it all the time. That, I'll tell you, he's not that guy with Spencer Strider. He's not going to strike out a bunch of people, get a bunch of whiffs. Well, maybe he is, because that's what he did tonight. And it's just, he can do it in so many ways. Had all of his pitches working. He threw all 6 pitches 10 or more times. It's just, how do you hit that? And for the most part tonight, the Red Sox didn't.
That was pretty much what I was going to say. I mean, the Red Sox were not able to solve the riddle that Max Fried was on the mound. You mentioned he mixed up those pitches, and he has that arsenal. I mean, how many pitchers can say that they've got more than 4 offerings anyway that they feel that confident about, let alone throwing 6 different pitches double-digit amount of times? That's just one of the things that was working so well for Max Fried. He was executing at a very high level, and a career high with his 13 strikeouts as well was the result of that. Pitching has been the story. It was again tonight with Max Fried leading the way. Early on, the offense got a little bit of help from the Boston defense to take a 2-0 lead, but it was great to see Ozzie Albies break a 3-3 tie with a 3-run homer. I reacted a little bit, I don't know, maybe sarcastically, sitting watching this game with my wife, and she said, "Why is the 3-run homer a big deal?" And I said, well, we haven't seen as many of them this year as the Braves have been accustomed to, but that just felt like a moment where, yeah, you'd take a run, but man, it was nice to get 3 with one swing of the bat.
It was great to see it from Ozzie, who has been struggling a lot here lately. So that was certainly something that you wanted to see. And after Matt Olson was unable to come through, and he's somebody that's, been hitting the ball a lot better lately. So that was frustrating. But again, to see Ozzie pick him up there and get that 3-run homer, like you said, I mean, we just haven't seen it a ton from the Braves this season. We've seen them get base runners on, but we just haven't seen that 2-3-run homer to really, give them a lead or extend a lead, which this did both of those with Ozzie Albies' home run there to break up that tie. So great to see it. If those can come back into play, if these baseballs start traveling like they're supposed to, that Braves offense, you're going to start to see more of those 2-3-run homers, because, again, they've been getting runners on base lately. It's just they haven't been able to come up with the big hit, and they were able to do so on Tuesday.
And the big hit doesn't always have to be a home run. I know you and I have said that many, many times. And one thing the Braves did really well last year, in addition to hit a lot of home runs, was they just kept racking up hit after hit, and they were able to do so with runners on base. And that's just been much easier said than done for whatever reason in 2024, particularly in that very rough month of May that the Braves just got out of. But 8 more runs up on the board. Who cares how they happen? You'll take them all. A little bit of help early on, big hit, big home run. Adding on a little bit later, Orlando Arcia also homered. The Braves added a 9th-inning run just to kind of, throw one more on top there, which, again, has been fewer and further between as far as games where that's been going on. The Red Sox got a couple of runs against Fried in the 4th inning. I know that looking at this line, you may see 7 innings, 3 runs, and think, this guy's been throwing complete games. This guy's capable of throwing shutouts. He's flirting with no hitters. How could you say that this is a better performance than those? Well, I think were it not for a catcher's interference and a pretty nicely placed 2-run single, this would have been a very different looking line for Max Fried, who only allowed 4 hits, only walked 1 batter. The Red Sox had precious few opportunities against him, but it did look like that they were able to cash in at a pivotal time in which you kind of wondered, was the Braves offense going to be able to answer? And we found out, as another discussion point, the Braves were in fact able to do that. But just so much to like about what Max Fried did in this game and really setting the tone for this entire rotation. I know Chris Sale's doing it as well, but the incumbent ace, Max Fried, has stepped up big time in the absence of Spencer Strider.
He is. And look, as great as Chris Sale has been and as great as Ronaldo Lopez has been, Max Fried is still the tenured ace of this staff, and he's pitched like it. Again, after those first 2 starts of the season, he's really pitched like the Max Fried that we've come to know and love. And again, it's sometimes been even better than that. Again, you're talking about complete game shutouts, flirting with no hitters.
Yeah.
And now he's doing it in a dominant fashion. And it just speaks to the type of pitcher that Max Fried is. And it's why I know we're not necessarily getting into conversation of contract and what that looks like, but it's why I don't necessarily worry too much about if he'll be good enough long term. When you have all the pitches that he has and the ability to command most of them, and then on a given night, maybe he doesn't have his slider, he usually always has at least his fastball and curveball, and then he's going to have either the sinker or the cutter or the changeup. Well, the changeup was really good in this one. He had 3 whiffs on 5 swings against that changeup. He only threw it 2 times, and it's why I don't worry about Max Fried long term. It's why I know nobody here worried after those first couple of starts to begin the season. Yep. He is just such a smart pitcher, and again, that deep a pitch repertoire to be able to go to on a given night. And it just happened to be a night where I feel like he had everything working, and you're not going to see that every time out. But again, for the most part, if you just have 2, 3, 4 of those working, he's going to get that weak contact we're used to seeing. But on this night, again, 21 whiffs, a 42% whiff rate. We don't see that from Max Fried very often.
No.
A 40% called strike plus whiff percentage. That's elite. That is elite. And you just don't see that from Max Fried. So again, it's in there. He can do it, but it's just typically a guy that's going to mix up his pitches, get that weak contact. But he showed you he can get it done in different ways. And again, that's why this is more of a longer conversation. I don't really worry too much about Max Fried.
Yeah, and I think he's just so good that you just figure that he's going to sort whatever it is out. And you knew that. I mean, that first start of the year was just, it was a boondoggle. I mean, it was ridiculous. He didn't get a call. Things kind of went sideways. You just couldn't leave him out there to absorb a beating and throw 60 pitches in the first inning. You're just not going to do that to any pitcher, really, but certainly not one of the aces of your staff. And that just felt like an outlier to me. I know he got jumped on by the Diamondbacks the next start and had one in Houston. I know that he personally hated, even though it wasn't really one of his worst starts of the year. Statistically speaking, he didn't like it, but he made those adjustments, and that's what the good ones do. And Max Fried's been one of the good ones for quite some time. Now, in that inning in which the Red Sox were able to get those couple of runs against Fried on that opposite field single by Bobby Dahlbeck, was a catcher's interference for Sean Murphy. He also took a pretty nasty foul tip in this game. And then the coup de grace in the 9th inning, he got plunked in the right elbow. And we saw that thing swell up in a matter of about 10 seconds in the trip from home plate to first base. Murphy had to leave that game. Initial x-rays, negative. Hopefully that swelling will go down and Sean Murphy doesn't have to miss any more time. But man, it was a rough night for Sean Murphy. It's been a rough start to the season for him, most certainly after missing 49 games. You just kind of breathe a sigh of relief that at least you got some good news with these x-rays after the game.
Yeah, certainly, hope it's nothing major there. I'm sure obviously he'll rest up for a few days, but you just hate it for Sean Murphy. I mean, he gets hurt the first day of the year, the season, and I was really excited about this season for Sean Murphy, but it feels like it's just one of those right now. Just nothing is going his way. But again, hopefully it's nothing major. Like you said, x-rays being negative. It didn't look great, obviously, watching him walk back to the dugout there, but it's been a rough go for Sean Murphy. But hey, maybe that means it's only up from here. That's something you got to try to look for with Sean Murphy, who, again, I wanted to see him come into the season. I thought he could prove that he was that guy he was in the first half last year, which was the best catcher in baseball. I still believe that's in there for Sean Murphy. It's just got to stay on the field. He hasn't been able to do that much this season.
Yeah, that is a little caveat about being the best, is you got to still be able to go out there and prove it on a regular basis. And for Sean Murphy, that 49-game stint on the injury list was nothing that he had signed up for. And it had to be killing him. In fact, I know it was, because he said it was just boring sitting around waiting for an oblique muscle to heal. But I know he's happy to be back out there. And hopefully this night won't put too much of a damper on Sean Murphy's near-term and long-term plans for 2024 and beyond. So the Braves offense with an 8-run day, a couple of early runs on that era, but some big home runs, tacking on a little bit late and supporting Max Fried in an 8-3 win over the Red Sox to start out this 9-game road trip that will take Atlanta to 3 cities, starting in Boston, heading to Washington, and then, of course, ending up in Baltimore with the showdown with the Orioles. And we will talk a little bit more about some of that later on in the Braves postcast. But when we come back, we'll get inside the box score, the line score, talk a little bit more about the mastery of Max Fried on this night, and, of course, the Braves offense showing some signs of life, which might be becoming a theme here in the month of June. Can it continue? Well, we'll find out as we continue. It's winner take all time in the NBA and the NHL. And FanDuel is giving you a shot to bring home a big win of your own, as right now new customers get a $150 bonus in bets with any winning $5 bet. That's $150 to bet on spreads, money lines, player props, and more. Visit FanDuel.com/lockedon. Make every playoff shot count. FanDuel is America's #1 sportsbook. Well, Jake, let's take a look at the box score and the line score for this game. We'll start with the latter, as the Braves are once again 10 games over 500 at 34-24. Their winning line, 8 runs on 8 hits. They did commit a couple of errors, and the Braves left just 2 men on base in this one. That's a kind of nice thing to see. Boston Red Sox take the loss, drop under 500. They're now 30-31. 3 runs, 5 hits, 2 errors, and 5 men left on base. Not a lot of opportunity for the Red Sox, as it was, again, Max Fried, the headliner on this night. Cutter Crawford didn't pitch badly for the Red Sox, it didn't seem like, but the Braves were able to get a big 3-run homer off of him that certainly sunk his line a bit. He drops to 2-5 as Fried picks up the win and improves to 6-2 on the year. Let's talk a little bit about that Max Fried start here. The final line, 7 innings, 4 hits, 3 runs, 2 of them earned thanks to that catcher's interference, 1 walk, 13 strikeouts, and 70 strikes on 103 pitches. It was nice to see that after the 6 innings, and he'd already tied his career high in strikeouts, I believe, at that point, or maybe surpassed it with the 12 strikeouts, he was able to come out and work a very efficient 7th inning, and I think Max Fried has just kind of earned that from Brian Snitker. If you're pitching that well, you'll get the opportunity to continue, and that was exactly what Max Fried was doing tonight, so why not give him that 7th frame?
Yeah, definitely earns it as a veteran. Obviously, the lead they had probably helps in that a little bit. But yeah, I'm kind of thought maybe you get him out there after that 6th inning because you had the lead, and he done so well at that point. But again, he's one of those guys. Chris Sale is too, and others that you got to take the ball out of their hand. They're going to want to continue to go back out there, and Max Fried with the day that he was having, I'm sure he didn't want it to end. Again, when you have that type of dominance that he had, I mean, it's crazy to look at it and see they scored 3 runs, but one of them, the home run from Dominic Smith, it had a 170 expected batting average. It's just a fly ball to left field in most parks, but that's what happens in Fenway sometimes. And the other 2 runs he gave up, again, I thought he was getting out of that. He got a big strikeout there with the bases loaded. Bobby Dahlbeck, got sawed off, but it floated into right field. That was after the catcher's interference too. So again, it's just one of those outings for Max Fried, and one that we're not accustomed to seeing, but he just had it that night, and you just didn't really want it to end. I didn't want it to end. I wanted him to go back out there just because it's not the typical thing that we see from Max Fried with all the strikeouts and all the whiffs that he was getting. That curveball, he threw one to end the inning against Dahlbeck later that was just knee buckling. It was just a beautiful sequence to end it there. And it's just when he's on like that and he can command all those pitches, it's just a lot of fun to watch.
Yeah, even with a dozen strikeouts through 6 innings, he was only at 93 pitches. So you average that out. That's only about 15 pitches per inning. You'll certainly take that. And he was able to get out of the 7th, picking up another strikeout and needing just 10 pitches to do that. So Max Fried, another, great performance for him, which is something the Braves have certainly needed. We talk about this rotation a lot, whether it's Fried or whether it's Chris Sale, Reynaldo Lopez, Charlie Morton. I mean, that starting 4, you've got pretty much sorted out. A guy who could be part of the answer in the 5th spot, Spencer Schwellenbach, will make his 2nd major league start. That will happen in Game 2 of this series on Wednesday. We'll talk more about him later. But you knew that the Braves were going to have to figure it out without Spencer Strider when he went down with elbow surgery after just 2 starts. Max Fried, meanwhile, snapped right back into form, continues to prove himself. And I think that the Braves had to feel, very good about the fact that, hey, at least we've got some quality pitchers to help us hold this thing together as we readjust the rotation. And as it turns out, this starting 4 has really solidified itself into one of the better starting staffs in the National League.
It feels funny to say for a team that's 10 games over 500, but the starting pitching is why they've stayed afloat. I mean, you had a 14 and 15 month of May, and a lot of that is due to the great starting pitching. And so, it's crazy to think where they would be without that right now, and that's after you lose Spencer Strider. But we've talked about it before. You now went from an ace duo in Max Fried and Spencer Strider to now an ace duo in Max Fried and Chris Sale. I know he got roughed up a little bit in his last outing, but I'm going to say that that's probably going to be an outlier for Chris Sale going forward. And then, Lopez and Morton are going to be about as good as any 3-4 that you're going to find in Major League Baseball right now. So starting staff has been great, figuring out that fifth spot. Again, we'll see if Schwellenbach can hold on to it there. But again, for the top four in this rotation, I mean, it's been why the Braves have remained, 10 games above 500, despite the rough stretch that they've gone on.
Yeah, I think it's been very good starting by that foursome right there. And then you try to sort things out in that fifth spot. And we can talk about some of those other candidates as we see them over the course of the year, Schwellenbach being the guy that's up now. And the bullpen has also been incredibly stable for the Braves. So if you can get a lead and take it late into the game, then the Braves bullpen more times than not has been able to hold on to that as well. But the pitching has definitely been the story, which is not necessarily what was expected out of this Braves club. But the fact that we've talked about all of the struggles and all of the challenges of this team, and they're still hanging around at 10 games over 500, if they do start getting this offense going, look out, because there is a lot better brand of baseball they can play. And we know because we've seen it both in 2023 and I think some in 2022, especially down the stretch and in that second half, as they were able to do exactly what they may have to do this year if they want to win the division. That's chased down a very capable and very hot team in the Philadelphia Phillies this time. A couple of years ago, it was the New York Mets. Looking into Max Fried's last 10 starts, I had to crunch these numbers because I knew it was good. I just wasn't sure how good. 184 ERA. He has tossed 68 and 2/3 innings, just 18 walks and 61 strikeouts over that 10-start stretch, keeping in mind that he gave up 10 runs in his first 2 starts. He's given up 14 in his last 10. Just a little bit more verification there that Max Fried is not only feeling himself, but he is giving the Braves the exact kind of production, the exact kind of dominance you need to help lead this starting staff. And the kind of thing that Max Fried, I think, has been known for since he stepped into this rotation full-time in 2019, but really took that step forward in 2020 to become the ace of the staff.
Yeah, and like I said, he has been and has been for a while, and that's one way to bring down an ERA that was, floating over 10 through his first couple of starts there. Go on a run like that is certainly going to get it back to where it should be for Max Fried.
Yeah, it certainly was. An 18 ERA didn't sound like what Max Fried was going to be dealing with throughout the course of the season. We knew that there were better starts, better results, more expected, I guess you could say. Although I don't know that we need to talk about expected stats too much more because we don't have the time to figure out why certain things have been working for the Braves, but you expected certain performances out of Max Fried, most definitely. I think Ozzie Albies, I know he'd had a couple of rough games coming into this one, was riding a hitless streak of at least a couple of games. Has been coming around a little bit since that slump after coming off the IL. Is 12 for his last 37, couple of hits, including the 3-run homer and a double in this game. You needed somebody, as you pointed out, Jake, to go ahead and pick up, get the hit that you needed in that position, especially after Matt Olson wasn't able to come through there. But last 10 games for Ozzie, batting well over 300, that's a pretty good sign because you may see him at the top of the order. You may see him in the middle of the order. He's going to play a pretty big role, I think, for the Braves as you move forward. Not that we didn't already expect that prior to the loss of your leadoff man.
Yeah, Ozzie is just one of those guys, and we've come to kind of expect it. He's going to have some pretty big highs and lows throughout a year, but at the end of it, you're going to look up, you're going to see, 270, 25, 30 home runs, close to 100 runs batted in. It's just, he's done it just about every year that he's been healthy and played all season. So, but he does have a lot of peaks and valleys in his game throughout the season, and hopefully we're about to see one of those peaks right now because when he gets hot and going like that, he can do things like we saw on Tuesday and get a bunch of home runs and drive in a bunch of runners. And that's really kind of where you want him in the middle of that order. I know the Braves are struggling to find somebody to fill in at the top right now. I don't see an obvious candidate for this Braves team right now at the top of the order. Obviously, Ozzie against lefties. I mean, I think that makes a lot of sense. Trying to pull in Michael Harris there. He was having a rough game until he got a hard hit single to end the night. But, he's obviously been scuffling a lot here lately. But Ozzie, like you said, he's going to have some big peaks and valleys. And hopefully we're seeing him getting on one of those hot streaks right now.
And keep in mind where Michael Harris was about a year ago this time, batting well under 200, trying to get his season on track, not really putting up the numbers that anybody had expected, including Michael himself. Of course, injury was a big part of it last year. This year, I think it's the free swinging ways that may be causing him to, expand his strike zone quite a bit and maybe not get the kind of contact that he wants. But if he's able to get back on track, make those adjustments, he's got some adequate time to turn his season around as well. And if it's not Michael Harris at the top, I'm hard-pressed to come up with anybody not named Ozzie Albies, but maybe give Jared Kelenic a shot up there if he gets hot. And I think that at this point, Brian Snitker could basically ride the hot hand if somebody makes sense up there, and those are three guys that could make sense at different times. Orlando Arcia has been looking for hits quite a bit lately as well, delivered his 6th home run of the year, adding a run in the 7th inning. Braves did more work in the 9th. Of course, Sean Murphy's hit by pitch, again, a pretty bizarre-looking injury because it swelled up so quickly on him. But again, the x-rays taken after the game initially showed that there was no fracture there, and hopefully that will remain the case when that swelling goes down. Sometimes the initial x-rays may not be able to find that, especially if it's all swelled up. But again, fingers crossed. You hope that Sean Murphy doesn't have to miss any more time because he has already been through enough this year on the injury front.
Yeah, certainly don't want him to miss any more time. Want to get him back in there. Him and Riley both. Obviously, Riley missing 2 weeks as well. You're trying to get those two guys back on track. But just to speak on the offense again, 8 hits on the night, but you see 2 runs in the 2nd, 1 run in the 5th, 3 runs in the 6th, 1 in the 7th, 1 in the 9th. I mean, this is the game I always talk about. This is what you want to see from an offense. Everybody in the lineup had a hard hit ball. Everybody either had a hit, walk, RBI, or run scored. All the starters, not counting Zach Short and Travis d'Arnaud, who came in at the end. But all the starters contributed in some way in this one. And you score throughout. You take the lead, you add on late. That's what we want to see more of from this Braves offense. I'm not ready to say they're back yet. Like I said, I'm going to need to see a longer stretch than this. But this is certainly one of those games where they checked all the boxes that I'm looking for offensively.
Yeah, I mean, these are the kind of games you want to see become a trend for this Braves club. And there was up and down the order, a lot of guys chipping in. And even Zach Short, who had to come in to run for Sean Murphy, was able to come in and score a run for the Braves in this one in the 8-3 victory. When we come back, we will look ahead to what's going on for the finale of this quick 2-game series, a 1:35 start at Fenway Park on Wednesday. We'll get you set up for that pitching matchup with Spencer Schwellenbach on the mound against Nick Pivetta. We'll also talk about some roster moves that the Braves made prior to opening the series in Boston. It comes your way next as the Braves postcast continues. Passion, drive, and patience. The formula for winning championships is also what keeps your ride or die alive. eBay Motors has everything you need to maintain your vehicle and level it up to peak performance: superchargers, roof racks, exhaust kits, LED headlights, and more. Whether you're into speed, power, or style, eBay Motors has you covered. With over 122 million parts, you'll always find exactly what you're looking for. And with eBay Guaranteed Fit, your part is guaranteed to fit your ride every time or your money back. Because with eBay Motors, you are burning rubber and not cash. With all the parts you need at the price you want, it's easy to make your car the MVP and bring home those huge wins. ebaymotors.com. Eligible items only. Exclusions apply. eBay Guaranteed Fit. Available only to U.S. customers. Let's talk about Game 2 of this series, the series finale, as it were, as the Braves and Red Sox played 2 at Truist Park a little bit earlier this season, and now 2 at Fenway Park in that split 4-game set for their interleague matchup. I don't remember what they call the natural rivalry. Is that right, Jake? Is that the?
Yeah, that's their natural rival.
Okay. Well, I mean, I have read in my Braves historian days that there were a lot of articles written in Boston papers that the wrong team left town to go to Milwaukee way back in the 1950s. I don't know. That seems kind of weird to think that right now, but we'll stick a pin in that discussion. Be that as it may, the Braves and Red Sox will finish out the series. Spencer Schwellenbach makes his second major league start for Atlanta, and he will be facing Nick Pivetta, who also saw the Braves earlier this year. I want to get into that matchup in just a moment, but we do want to talk about as well, the Braves had to make some roster moves. They signed infielder Brian Anderson. He had been a longtime Marlin. We've seen him a lot. It feels like he was always coming up with a big hit at some point during a series between those two clubs, especially early in his career. Had signed with Seattle, was with them in spring training, didn't make the club out of spring, and was in the minor leagues there, batting .270. Decent numbers anyway at AAA. The Braves signed him to a major league contract. Chadwick Tromp has been optioned back down to AAA Gwinnett, so the Braves don't have 3 catchers. And, of course, the first game after that, one of your catchers has an injury scare, so Travis d'Arnaud had to finish the game for Atlanta today. But to make room on the 40-man roster, and we can unpack this more in a moment, Tyler Matzik placed on the 60-day IL. But let me ask you, Jake, the Braves are just pretty much looking at the 25th and 26th roster spots. So the Brian Anderson signing, while interesting, doesn't really change a whole lot. It just gives the Braves a versatile veteran that I think they liked from seeing him over the years down in Miami.
Yeah, I mean, we know, we say it all the time. Charlie Culberson sat on the bench for a month or more
Well,
last year, and we didn't see him. So, I mean, it's a possibility Brian Anderson never sees the field for the Atlanta Braves, but he does give you good depth at pretty much every corner spot, whether it be third, left, right. I'm sure you can play some first base as well in there. So, just gives you some more versatility. Guy that has some pop. I feel like he had a really good run for Milwaukee, I believe, last season it was when he was with them. So, again, you remember him from his days with the Marlins, coming out with some big hits. And like I said, had some power in that bat, but don't know how much playing time he'll actually get with the Braves.
yeah, fourth in Rookie of the Year, the season that Ronald Acuna Jr. won it in 2018. 2018, 2019, 2020, it seemed like he was just kind of a fixture player for the Marlins. Not a franchise type player, but just a very nice piece to what they were doing. 21 and 22, some regression. You mentioned he was playing in Milwaukee last year and had signed with Seattle before coming over to the Braves here with a major league deal in the early part of the month of June. We'll see how they mix Brian Anderson in here. The Tyler Matzik news, certainly disappointing. He's transferred to the 60-day injured list from the 15-day. We hadn't really heard much over the last 3 weeks, so you kind of wondered if nothing was really going on, if he wasn't, throwing and maybe going out on a rehab assignment. If he needed that, then what was that next step going to be? This gives him more time, but obviously on the road back from Tommy John surgery, he hasn't been able to kind of recapture that form and that velocity just yet. But, he will have an opportunity to rest and continue to work, and maybe in the second half can be part of the Braves' plans here in this bullpen.
And that's what you hope, is that he just really needs more time to rest and recover and get ready. I know me and you have both talked about it, the fact that it was going to be second half where we really started to look toward for Tyler Matzik to hopefully be back to that form we've seen in the past. Obviously a huge question mark now because we didn't really see much of that at all in the first half, and now he's injured. So, how much does that kind of set him back? How much more time does he need to really get to that point? Can he get to that point? Still a question right now for Tyler Matzik, but certainly, all Braves fans out there cheering for him, wanting the best for him. And again, hopefully he'll get that opportunity later in the season.
Yeah, when I talked to him way back when spring training started, obviously everyone was curious about what the timeline would be. And he said, look, I would understand if I needed to, go down to the minor leagues on a rehab assignment, get some more innings, throw some more beyond just what I'll do in the spring. But then Brian Snitker said we kind of felt like with the strength of the bullpen that we had, that we could bring him along and work him through in the right spots in the major leagues. And, you weren't expecting him to be the high leverage guy that you gave the ball in the most important innings, which, obviously a lot of people have quite fond memories of Tyler Matzik in high leverage situations. It wasn't time for that yet, but they felt comfortable enough, but the results simply weren't there. And once the elbows started barking at him again, no reason to keep pushing through that. Give him a little bit more time here with this move to the 60-day IL, which I think was just kind of necessitated by needing to have that roster spot to use somebody to help out on the 26 man. And as in this case, it was Brian Anderson. So a few roster moves for the Braves, prior to starting the series in Boston. As far as closing out the series in Boston, that will happen on Wednesday. Spencer Schwellenbach allowed 3 runs on one swing of Lane Thomas's bat last time out. 5 strikeouts on his debut game against Washington last week. Really liked what I saw from him. I thought it was a good, first step, foundation, whatever you want to call it. Now his first start on the road as a major leaguer in one of the most historic ballparks in the game. Should be pretty cool for him as he matches up against Nick Pivetta, who's 2-4 with a 4.08 ERA.
Yeah, looking forward to seeing what Schwellenbach does this time, following out his first outing, which I thought was very good. We talked about on here. I was very encouraged from it. A guy that throws a lot of strikes. You've seen a Red Sox team that strikes out a lot and struck out a lot on Tuesday. So hopefully that'll be good for Schwellenbach. Again, I think the key for him is just trusting his stuff. He has really good stuff, really good slider, curveball, and an upper 90s fastball. So he has good stuff, just trusted in the zone that it can get out. Pivetta also can have good stuff. He has big whiff rates on his curveball and his sweeper as well, and an upper 90s fastball. So you're going to see kind of similar things from these two pitchers on a Wednesday. But Braves only struck out 6 times on Tuesday. Hopefully that's a trend that continues against a good strikeout pitcher like Pivetta, and they come out with a win. And I got to give a shout out to Steven B_Liars on X, who's been tracking this for a while now. The Braves ended their streak of losing games when opponents scored more than 2 runs. It had been 38 days, Grant, since they had won a game where their opponent scored 2 or more runs. So that streak is finally over, and hopefully we don't give up too many more runs like that, but hopefully if we do, the Braves offense can handle it and come back.
I just have to ask, how in the world is that a stat with this team of assembled sluggers in this lineup? Baseball does things that you just don't expect sometimes, and you just have to chalk up to the weirdness that is this game. But the Braves clearly capable of scoring some runs. They've been showing that a little bit more lately. I don't want to say that they're all the way back yet, but as Jake mentioned earlier, this looked like a lot more up and down the lineup, some contributions, some hard hit balls. Of course, we saw even in the losing effort against Oakland on Saturday that the Braves put up a whole bunch of crooked numbers, hit some home runs. Maybe they could do that again on Wednesday to help out Spencer Schwellenbach. Give him some run support early on, I think. He is 0-1 with a 5.40 ERA. Nick Pivetta 2-4 with a 4.08. First pitch at Fenway Park, 1:35 p.m. Eastern Time on Wednesday as the Braves and Red Sox will close out that series. That brings us to the end of this edition of the Braves Postcast. Make sure you subscribe to Locked On Sports Atlanta here on YouTube and Locked On Braves wherever you get your podcast. We appreciate you as always riding along with us. We look forward to catching you after the finale of this quick series. We'll do that on Wednesday. And until then, for Jake Mastroianni, I'm Grant McAuley. So long, everyone.